Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work and create, the Kumbameri people of the Yungumbeh Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Hello and welcome to A Nourished Woman, the podcast. I am your host, Mikka Raer. This is a conversational series created to guide women towards a more true, whole, fulfilling and joyful way of living. Together with some truly incredible guests, we embrace what connects us to our vitality and some of the ways that we can nourish our minds, bodies and soul. A nourished woman represents a return to wholeness and reclamation of our innate wisdom, our body's intelligence, our appetite for life, and our capacity for joy, play and pleasure. It's about moving beyond mere survival and embodying a nourishing and generative mode of living that is aligned with our values, our energy, our desires, and honours the season of life we are in. Thank you for being here. Enjoy. I am so excited to introduce you to Greer Stening. Greer is a creative expression and business mentor, human design embodiment coach, artist, writer, speaker, and energy revolutionary. I love that. Greer works with creative entrepreneurs to distill their unique zest and star qualities into high-value commercial offerings that build one-of-a-kind creative legacy businesses. She uses the sciences of human design, relational intelligence and body-led energetics to inform a personalised approach to self, art and business that helps creatives optimise their energy investments and maximise their personal fulfilment as entrepreneurs. A commercial litigator for 10 years, Greer supports her clients in implementing what she calls bespoke business strategies that amplify both the felt experience of her clients' offerings and their prosperity-generating potential. Greer is a 5-1 emotional Mani-Gen, Leo Sun, Aquarius Moon, and Sagittarius Rising. I want to take this opportunity to speak a little into my experience with Greer. Greer has been my mentor, off and on for about a year and a half. What started as a bespoke business human design reading led to being a mentoring client, getting to know my unique energetic anatomy, a deconditioning and reconditioning journey, which we get into in this conversation. She has been such an expander and instrumental in both my personal growth and the growth of my business. Greer is a divine creature, full of otherworldly wisdom, and I have to say, one of my absolute favourite human beings. She has been so significant in the journey of connecting me to my embodiment of what it means for me to be a nourished woman, and I will be forever grateful. In this episode, we cover her journey from a frustrated and burnt-out litigation lawyer to a woman that is thriving, what human design is, and when it came into her orbit, uncovering our inner ecosystems, our nervous system imprints and patterns, what deconditioning and reconditioning means in the context of human design, and inner resourcing and nourishment in daily life. For anyone new to human design, I want you to be rest assured that we get into this and I get Greer's unique take and explanation of what human design is. I also urge you to go and do a little bit of your own research. Pull up your chart. There are so many amazing resources out there now. Making contact with what it means for you to be a nourished woman starts with a better understanding of self. And from my experience, human design has been one of the most affirming systems I've ever made contact with. I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, let's jump straight in. So the first question I wanted to ask you is how you would describe the current season of life you are in.
Oh my God. Mikka, I love this question. I love it. The current season of life I'm in. Well, I guess when I think back to where I was even just like 5 years ago, and I was working as a litigation lawyer, I was in my late 20s, I was in my Saturn return, I was burning the candle at both ends, I was hyper fixated on particular goals and metrics around I need to buy a house, I need to get married, I need to have babies, oh fuck, like I'm about to turn 30. And I was just feeling absolutely disconnected from myself and freaking out about how I was going to fix my life basically. I was really stressed out, I was burnt out, and I'd actually arrived at that place because I had achieved all of the goals that I had set for myself back when I initially graduated high school. So I knew I wanted to be a litigation lawyer. I knew I wanted to work for a national firm. I pursued all of those typical things like every, little Hermione Granger at high school does. And that was definitely me. And on the other side of achieving all of those goals, like so many people have the same experience, I realized that I don't want any of this. It's not fun. It's not sustainable for my body. I feel like I never have time to see my family. Life is really short. And I was starting to really open my eyes up to all of those things. And it totally shifted a lot of my core values because of that and led me into a totally different season of life. As well, the type of law I was doing when I was a litigator was primarily focused in personal injury. So every single day I was going to work and reading thousands and thousands and thousands of words every day, in-depth accounts of people's most terrible days of their life. The day where they've lost everything, the day where they've had a freak accident. Some of the cases I worked on involved children. Like it was really, really, really heavy stuff, and that actually sent me into like a legit existential crisis. But it also cultivated this sense within me that fuck, life is so short. Nothing is guaranteed. Literally nothing is guaranteed. You could at any moment have everything turned on its head. And the more this sort of like I sat with that piece and I tried to quieten the part of myself that wanted to catastrophize and move into anxiety mode, and I was definitely dealing with anxiety, the more I arrived at a place of what was really important for me. And that is the value piece that really started to solidify and led me to designing a life in a very different way. And I had to dismantle a lot of the rules and the conditioning imprints I was carrying myself in order to get into this season of life that I'm in right now. So I know that's kind of like a long answer, but I think that background context is really important because every single person has their own story and journey in that way. And a previous version of myself would have felt like I needed to justify whatever action it was that I was taking, in consideration to what those conditioning imprints were trying to tell me. So I didn't just leave my law career. I actually felt like the universe pushed me out of it. And I didn't make that decision going, oh yeah, like I'm totally owning this decision. Like I'm leaving law. I know what I'm doing here. It was something that felt like it was written. It was written. It was going to happen sooner or later, but it was something that I sort of had to learn the hard way. And on the other side of that, I realized actually when it comes to this one precious life that I have, this short amount of time on this earth, I need to consciously co-create that from the ground up. And that looks like a million little decisions that I was making every single day that allowed me to create a different life. And fast forward 5 years, I'm now living as a complete creative. I have a really beautiful, regenerative digital business where I get to work with other phenomenal creative people. I get to utilize all of the skills that I developed for 10 years as a litigator in the business space. But I'm living so much more softly and gently. And the goals that I have they look nothing like the goals I had when I was 27 and I really needed to own XYZ and go holiday in XYZ place, or it was just very much so externally focused. So these days, life is looking so much more peaceful and embodied and calm. But I had to have that dismantling. I had to have that wake up call. I had to burn out and be pushed into that sort of initiation, which is so Saturn return, like such a typical Saturn return experience. Mine was the first house of identity. So that kind of explains it a little bit as well. I've just adopted
I love that. Peaceful.
Well, just to give a little bit more context to this, to the type of the season of life I'm in. We've just adopted our little man Mo, and you know, I relocated out of the city back to my hometown in Airlie Beach, and life is about nature, creation, community, family, and none of the things I used to think were important are important anymore.
So how do you think that you made contact with those values? Because obviously they shifted, but I'm wondering, like, what do you think was the catalyst for you, you know, discovering what your new value set was?
It really, like, if I was to give some kind of metaphor for it, it felt like a chiseling away, because it was always there. And I think every single one of us knows deep, deep, deep down what it is that we really value. But whilst we're moving with the tribe or we're moving with our conditioning imprints, it's so easy to believe something else. So I had a series of experiences that just, and this is why I said before, it felt like it was written. It felt like the universe was pushing me in this direction in a really obvious way, because it was an experience of things being almost thrown in my face. Like, are you going to keep doing this to yourself? Like, what the fuck, Grizzly? Wake up. One of those experiences was, to be perfectly honest, whilst I was still working as a lawyer, one of my it was actually my boss. Her husband passed away really young and unexpectedly in an accident. And that was like a big, I'd already been very much so sitting with this existential sort of conundrum and thinking about this whole topic a lot. And then that happened. And I was like, what are we doing? Like, I'm billing 6 units of my time. I'm constantly stressed. I don't see my friends and family. I might have this really great job, but fuck, my partner could die at any moment. And it was just like, it was extremely rattling to my core. And I think when you witness anyone going through something like that, it doesn't matter how far removed, it just is such a visceral reminder that none of us are exempt from that experience, and that life really is fucking short. And so there were a few things like that, and that was a really big one that hit me really deeply. And yeah, I just started to be like, okay, universe, I'm fucking listening to you. But it was, to answer the question, I really felt like a combination of these events showing me what I needed to see, and me being ready to start seeing them, because I knew I wasn't happy. I knew I was burnt out and depleted. And then me starting to peel back and shedding those things. And as I let those things go, my own core values became so much louder. And I realized these had always been there. And I had always been connected to them. I just, somewhere along the line, I'd stopped moving from that place. And I'd started pursuing what I'd been conditioned to believe was important. So you graduate uni and you get a job, and then you start climbing this corporate ladder, and I worked with people that I absolutely loved. I worked with excellent lawyers. They inspired me. And so in that ecosystem, I guess like the motivating force is really painted as climbing up, getting promoted, having incredible results for your clients. And I got swept up in that machine. I have an undefined heart as well. And there was something in me that, the people pleaser, the person who just wanted to achieve that little, like I said, inner Hermione Granger, really got caught up in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that in different versions. I love what you said about the values kind of already being there. And I think this is the thing. I think we make it more complicated than it actually is or needs to be. Like, I think you're so right about those values just always being there, those core values, which I think are probably fairly universal. And quite simple, I think. But I think, yeah, for some reason we feel like that can't possibly be enough, or those things can't possibly fulfill us as much as success. And I suppose that's where the conditioning piece comes in as well. So you mentioned undefined heart, and obviously we haven't touched on human design yet. And I'm hoping we can have a unique conversation about it. But when did you make contact with human design? How did that happen? And yeah, I'd love to know a little bit about that, because I don't actually know.
Yeah. It was during this whole sort of existential crisis, this Saturn return period that I was in. That's when I found out about it. So it felt kismet, because I had this lunch planned with a friend who I'd met in Japan. And she came to visit me in Newcastle, and we organized a lunch, and I hadn't seen her in years. And she sat next to me and she goes, "Grizzly, oh my God, have you heard of human design? You're going to absolutely jizz your pants. Like, you're going to lose it. It's so Greer. It's such a thing." And she showed me on her phone, and we were talking about it, and I was like, oh my God, I love this. So she was my roommate when I was traveling over in Japan doing a ski season, and I think the poor girl heard me talk about astrology and personal development and energy and all a lot over that season, being my roommate. And so God bless her. And Hannah, my good friend, let me know about this system. And from there, it was just, I went and ordered every single book. And I think I paid like some ridiculous amount of money, because at that point it was really hard to get human design books in Australia. So there was that. And I think for me, I'm super ninth house heavy in placements. In my natal astrology, I'm a 5/1. Like I said, Hermione Granger, like, love my books, love to learn. And so from there, it was just all consuming. As well, I'd already previously studied the systems that human design is comprised of. So the I Ching, obviously astrology, the Kabbalah, and the chakra system as well. So I was really familiar with those, I guess, schools of thought, mythologies. And when I moved into learning about human design, it really felt like, oh, this is just something this is a language I already speak. It's just really this beautiful articulation that I just absolutely loved. So that was the beginning. But I think in terms of like my body of work specifically and my approach to human design, that really seeded many, many years before, when I was 22 years old. I was in a car accident and I was quite badly injured in that. I had a really bad back injury. I was in an outpatient program for weeks and weeks. It took me about a year to recover. And during that time, I realized at some point that I wasn't healing physically. And me being me and the sort of person I was like, what is the energetic reason? And I started researching that. And then I stumbled upon this book by a lady called Carolyn Mace, who, if you know her, you absolutely know her. She's been on Oprah. She's just one of the goats in this space. And one of her sort of best-selling books is called Anatomy of the Spirit. And that talks a lot about the body energy system and our spiritual makeup as human beings, and how that is connected with our physical experience and the things that can sort of manifest from that in terms of illness in the body. So that was something that really was seated in me quite young and quite viscerally, because I was healing myself. It felt like a process I really had to move myself through at that age of 22. And her book was something that it was my Bible. I literally carried it with me everywhere for years and years. It was a book I had in Japan when I met Hannah and was chewing her ear off about it. So I can see now all these little dots that are connected, and that is really, really crucial to like how I've interpreted the system since then.
I love that. I love finding out about that. And I think it shows, like you were saying, it just is more proof that the universe was, tapping on your shoulder. These things were all lining up, for you to land where you are now. So obviously some people who are listening, well, not obviously, but some people who are listening potentially aren't quite sure what human design is. So can you give, you've already touched on it beautifully, but could you give us like a very succinct kind of explanation of what it is?
So human design is a system that synthesizes various ancient wisdom systems and brings them all together and layers in a lot of what we now know through modern science, through quantum mechanics, through epigenetics, through psychology. It's sort of like this conglomeration of human wisdom, or a wisdom around the mechanical, energetic experience of being a physical human being in this incarnation. And the way I think about that system is something that just gives a language to things that are universal truths and things that are mechanical, energetic truths around what it is to live as a human being. And so through that language, by having an awareness of this language and understanding how it uniquely operates for us, how our own unique energetics work, as well as how other people are so energetically diverse from us, allows us to navigate the human experience with so much more awareness and consciousness. It doesn't allow us to bypass the human experience. It's not about like doing life correctly. It's not about always following our strategy and authority, which is a key piece of the human design system. I really like to think of it as a language that is giving an articulation to things that we need to meaningfully work with if we want to be aware, embodied, authentic individuals.
Perfect. I love that. I've heard you speak about it as a way to direct our awareness. You mentioned awareness and our thought patterns. What do you mean by that?
So human design is really like one of the foundational concepts in human design is that as a tribal species, humans have reached a point in our evolution where we're at this intersection, or this juncture where we are transitioning from really needing to evolve to be very much so interconnected with the tribal system. And that's allowed us to arrive at the place that we've now arrived at. But we're also moving past that place now. And so we're starting to see in our society that there is this real tension point between the things that are a part of our socialized culture, and that's things like conditioning imprints. That's things like me believing I had to go to law school and do life in a particular way in order to be happy. Inherited belief systems that come through that socialization process, and our awareness of how they actually can limit and constrain us. And how, whilst they are very important because we're a tribal species and our brain is wired for social connection, Brene Brown's work is so incredible in terms of documenting that. we know that about ourselves now, but we also know that whilst that's an important part of our evolution, at some point we need to mature our own individual awareness so that we can start to discern which societal belief systems, which conditioning imprints, which tribal imprints are things that we need to leave behind or shed or leave on the table for other people because they're not correct for us as individuals. Because if we can have that awareness around the socialization that we all have, because we're all tribal humans, we're all human beings, and an awareness around where that stops benefiting us and where it actually starts limiting us, that's when we can really start to step into self-actualization. I think there's not a single human being on the planet who can experience growth without at some point identifying where they need to separate from what they've been taught or the belief systems they've inherited. And that's something that I think we go on a journey throughout our life. And our beliefs should be evolving and shifting as we shift and evolve.
Amazing. I love that so much. So I wanted to ask you too, because you've mentioned conscious awareness, and I'm wondering, because you've mentioned this to me before, and I thought it was like something we should definitely speak about, which was the conscious awareness practices that human design gives us a language for. I'd really love you to kind of explain that and speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess like the starting point in human design is really understanding. We would say start with your energy type most of the time. That's where you'd be beginning out. So if you were new to human design and you pulled up your chart, one of the first pieces you'd want to look at would be your energy type. And the piece that goes along with your energy type is what we call your strategy. And your strategy is one of these awareness practices that I'm speaking to. So say, for instance, let's talk about manifesting generators. We're both manifesting generators, which is one of the 5 or 4 energy types. Technically, Mani-Gens and generators are the same type. So that's why I say 4. But of those energy types, they all work in different ways in terms of your energy type is speaking to the mechanical operation of your auric body. So different human beings, there's different types of human beings in terms of how we use our life force energy day to day and how that is mechanically exchanged with other people and with the environment around us. And the idea is that obviously nature does not make mistakes. Nature is so intelligent, and the tribal species as a whole needs every single one of us living the mechanics of our particular type so that the human species can come together in this beautiful symbiosis. So we need manifesting generators doing and living as manifesting generators. Same for generators, manifestors, reflectors, and projectors, which are the 4 other types. When we encounter our energy type and we learn about our strategy that goes with that type, it allows us to orient ourselves in the present moment and start to consider how we're actually investing our energy day to day. And are we doing it in a way that is native to our personal energy system? Or are we doing it in a way that has been programmed, conditioned, or learned by the people around us? So I think that is where the awareness practice has such a practical application, just day to day. So for Mani-Gens, our strategy is, well, it's described as wait to respond. And what that's really talking about is having some kind of somatic connection to your, what we call in human design, your sacral life force. So the sacral is one of the energy centers in human design. So that's likened to one of the chakras. And understanding the energetics that go along with that energy center really informs the strategy for us as Mani-Gens and generators, so sacral beings we're called. When we understand somatically what it means to respond with our life force and to then invest that life force in a process and receive satisfaction from that process, we're living our strategy. We are using our energy as a tool that is invested, that actually creates a return on investment. And that's exactly what nature wants from us, right? Nature's like, okay, I gave you the DNA to do this. I made it feel good when you do this. Do this. And yet humans are like, I'm going to do
keep doing that.
of like what feels good for my body. And as, you know, social beings as well, we've layered in, and we're still in the infancy of this, but we've laid in a lot of emotional complexity. And the emotional system is the nervous system. And so there's so much that can really stand in the way from a very physiological perspective, as well as a mindset perspective, around why we wouldn't naturally listen to our sacral response. And so the human design system provides us with so much understanding and context to what that experience is for each energy type, to live with a particular type of socialized conditioning, and then understand like how that's impacting the body, how that's impacting the nervous system, and then from there, how it's informing our behaviors and our choices. So as Manigens, we're often really conditioned to do work. You know, we're very efficient people. We can go, go, go. We can do a lot, and we can often move ourselves into socialized roles as individuals where we're doing everything for everyone else and nothing for ourselves. And that's where human design comes in and says, your strategy is way to respond. This is what a response feels like in your body. This is what a response does for your personal energy system. And this is how, when you live from this space, you actually feed into the tribal system of humanity as a whole. And so there's this dual function of keeping you in your own energetic health, but also serving the collective. And that's what I mean about awareness practices. And strategy is one of the best ones. In fact, you don't really need anything else in human design besides your strategy and authority. And so, even though it's a really fascinating system to dive into, the pieces that actually change your life and the pieces you work with day to day are always going to come back to that strategy and authority piece. That was pretty high level, though. Please let me know if that all made sense. I kind of went straight to
No, I mean, look, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. But I like how you said in the end there that, you know, the strategy and authority are the most important pieces to have an understanding of. I suppose, though, and like us, I'm speaking from my own experience as well. Obviously, I found human design, it's been a really important part of my journey and one of the best self-awareness tools, or, you know, the ways that I've learnt about how I make decisions and how I move through the world and all of those kinds of things. And you will know that because we've worked together. But like, it's been a journey, and I think it's amazing to have awareness, but then how do we, you know, so we know this about ourselves. Obviously, me as a Manigen, I know what my strategy is. How do I know how to listen to my sacral? What is the process to getting to the point where I actually can listen to my sacral?
Well, that's why I mentioned the piece around the emotional complexities that each of us bring to the table and how that interrelates with our nervous system, because that's really like that's the home of our habitual behaviors and actions. And I think what you've said there in terms of like, how can I listen to it, is such a critical piece for everyone, because it doesn't matter if it's human design or some other system of self-awareness. A lot of the time we hear the self-awareness pieces and we're like, yes, this is the answer. I totally resonate. And then real life comes along and
Now
we're doing
what?
mom shit. I'm still reacting when I'm on an emotional high or whatever it is. So
yeah,
that's really where the deconditioning process comes in, that human design speaks to, where it's, again, removing and shedding the things that we've learned and adopted. But when I'm working with clients, the thing that I really try to bring it back to is understanding the habitual body and moving and using this self-awareness piece to gently reorganize that or repattern that. But understanding as well that it's just a habit, and that's a neural pathway, that's a pathway that exists in your nervous system, is so important, because you need to give yourself grace. I'm a fucking imperfect human over here. Like I might have been in my human design experiment for 5 years, but I frequently do not follow my strategy and authority, and I learn so much about myself. So even just having awareness retrospectively brings this whole other dimension to the things that I ultimately extract from life and the lessons that I receive. But to take it back to a practical first step, if you can understand what your habitual patterns are versus have, and on the other side at the same time have an awareness of how you could potentially move in a more authentic way, having even just a mental understanding of what that could look like, can be the door that you need that allows you to begin experimenting with new ways of being. And it really just comes back to your power of choice and how you can empower the power of choice. Even in those moments when our reflexes in our body just want to snap that personality back into place, and, you know, we can struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. I think it's also just, you know, starting to make different decisions, starting to make different choices. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I guess, you know, like with my personal experience, that I wasn't, and this is why I felt like the universe pushed me into this trajectory, because at some point my experiences in my life got to a tension point where it was, I could not really deal with my own bullshit any longer. And a line was drawn in the sand where I was like, I will tolerate my bullshit no more. And that's really been one of the key things that has allowed me to get to the point of, okay, I have the awareness, I understand my patterns, and I'm sick of this shit. So what am I going to do differently this time? Using that as a little bit of a jump board. And I think in reality, that's usually how it plays out for us. You know, very rarely does anyone meditate themselves into a big identity shift or a big change in the way they somatically express. I think we've got to work with the places that life is pushing us towards. And I think that will naturally happen when we're living out of alignment, as it did for me. Eventually there's a pressure that builds, and we go, okay, I'm going to listen to this, or I'm going to fuck shit up. Which one is it going to be?
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, we do. It is the same for a lot of, or for everyone. I think it just always fascinates me that it usually takes such a big kind of slap in the face, so to speak, to make any significant change. And I think it's like, speaking back to, you know, it's this, once you know, you can't unknow these things. And then I think it just makes it even easier to pick up on these cues and, you know, even the subtle things. Then, like, it might have taken that kind of big shift for you to move into wanting to learn about something like this, or connect with, you know, just learn a little bit more about yourself. But then once you do, you start picking up on those subtle cues, and it's a lot easier to identify when you are living out of alignment, or you've made a decision that's out of alignment, or something's just not quite fitting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why self-awareness is something that will accompany, or it will herald, these tension points that we ultimately experience. Because once we're aware, we can't bullshit ourselves anymore, and we can't ignore it. And so the tension, the internal tension point, is naturally going to build from there. And that's also why so much of the time it can be hard to see what we don't want to see.
Yeah. But I mean, so with human design, when we speak about our not self themes, do you think that in itself is a way to kind of, like, so for example, for us, frustration, because I know for me that is something I've experienced time and time again. And until I knew about that, I didn't understand what that meant, you know, for me, that feeling. And the sick of my own bullshit. Yeah, feels true. But yeah, the frustration piece for me. So do you think, like, is that the key? Is it like understanding that for example, within human design, the not self themes for each energy type, and then understand that when we feel that, that is that nudge.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. So in human design, for each of the energy types, each type is associated with its signature theme and its not self theme. And the way I like to describe these things is that they are a mechanism of our biology that are here to herald when we are investing our energy correctly and sustainably versus incorrectly or unsustainably. And so our signature, when you follow your strategy, the idea is in human design, you experience your signature. So for us, for instance, as Manigens, when we follow our strategy of way to respond and we invest our life force, when we felt that pull, when we felt that somatic movement towards what it is that we want to get involved with, and we get our hands stuck in and we stay with the process, we feel our signature, which is satisfaction, which is like, oh, yes, it can be challenging. It can still, press us, but there's something about it that is so deeply, viscerally satisfying for us. That's our signature as sacral beings. On the other side of that, we have our not self theme, which is as many gens and generators, it's frustration. So I always describe that as a course correcting sort of little red flag from our biology to take notice of. And it's not the case that we want to be like, oh my God, I'm frustrated, I must absolutely stop what I'm doing. It's no. And it's definitely not something to be used as this be like, oh, it feels hard, it's incorrect for me. And I have to say, I really can't stand that rhetoric around human design. It's just like, have fun going nowhere. Like literally have fun going nowhere and doing instead, and when you think about human evolution and just the wisdom of nature, generally speaking, if we think of frustration as something it's this little gauge in our energy body saying, you're moving into unsustainable territory here. Check yourself in terms of how you're investing your energy. Sometimes it's not what we're investing our energy in, it's how we're investing our energy in that process as well. So that's another nuance. But you can think about the signature and the not self as saying sustainable, unsustainable. And even if you're experiencing your signature, whilst that's sustainable, you're still going to at some point need rest, no matter what energy type you are. So we want to be just having those feelings, having an awareness of how those feelings show up for us in the context of our energy type, and begin to work with them in that way. One of the examples I use for times when we might make a conscious decision to enter into our not self, I often think about, and I've told you about this before, it's so funny, bless my 75-year-old father calling me up several times each week to help him with something on his computer. And, if I was some kind of human design Puritan, I'd be like, I don't invest my energy in that because that's frustrating as fuck. But, no, my value system says to me, my personal value system says, okay, maybe I don't need to go share my energy with every Tom, Dick, and Harry who asks for help, but this is important to me. And so I'm going to consciously choose to enter into potential frustration territory and challenge myself to just be with that for whatever amount of time, because ultimately being there for my dad and loving him as his daughter is just so much more important to me. So there may be lots of instances where we're experiencing our not self, and it doesn't mean we're living incorrectly. It's just something that we want to be listening to just as much as we're listening to our signature.
Yeah, very true. So you've spoken a lot about, how to direct our energy and having awareness of our energy. So I'd love to chat with you about managing our energy and how important that is. I know you and I have spoken about this ourselves, and energy management being this kind of form of nourishment, which is very important. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, my personal experience was when I was in my little Saturn return crisis and being like this type A personality. I mean, that's how I identified at the time. I definitely don't identify like that anymore. But I was someone who, you know, I did all of the manifestation practices. I did all of the healing. I was constantly, you know, meeting my inner child. I was doing these deep kinesiology sessions. I was breaking into generational curses in my physiology or whatever it was. I was doing all of that work. But ultimately, nothing in my external reality was significantly moving and changing. And what that came back to, or what I now know through retrospect, is that I was not shifting the way I habitually managed my energy off the back of that. I had more self-awareness in my relationships. I had, you know, more compassion for myself. I had more self-confidence as a result of all those that healing that I did. But it didn't, you know, and manifesting in the way that I was sort of doing it, it was not anything that really shifted my external reality. You know, in terms of my felt experience, you know, I wasn't experiencing my signature, is what I now know. I wasn't experiencing satisfaction. And so, and human design was this, like, I guess, this catalyst for understanding how energy management is this dynamic, ever evolving piece of our spiritual physiology that we need to work with just as much as we're working with our physical health. So if I'm going to yoga every day and I'm eating, you know, organic foods and I'm doing these things, and it's a constant nourishment piece, then that also needs to apply to my personal energy system in totality, not just the inner child, my relationship, trying to manifest a promotion or whatever the fuck space I was in back then. And what I learned was that personal energy management is really about these micro choices that we make. And a lot of those choices aren't actually seen. And a lot of those choices don't result in a physical output of activity. A lot of the time, it's more of a psychic practice internally that is allowing us to move things through the body and digest life in a way that's healthy and direct our life force in a way that's sustainable, nourishing, and healthy. And so I started to zoom in on the thought processes, on the internal dialogues that I had that were entangled and meshed with my day-to-day choices. And some of those were so minute and small. And some of them had, you know, really big impacts in terms of eventually, you know, getting to the point where I realized my law career was not sustainable for my personal energy system if I wanted to have a vital personal energy system. So that's my little spiel on personal energy management. But if you, like, you know, want a bit more of a specific example, we could dig into something like that. Like, if there's been a piece for you that has been alive in your experience of that.
No, I mean, I think you covered it all. I think for me, obviously, like, we've kind of worked through a lot of this, and you touched on it, right, when you were speaking about the conditioning and the societal imprints that we have. For example, for me as a Manigen, or just, I think also as a mum as well, having my own business, all of those sorts of things, you know, trying to do it all, be it all, without taking care of my own energy was never going to be sustainable. And, you know, I learned that the hard way, definitely experiencing burnout in my own way as well. So yeah, I think it's really important for us to have an idea of how to, or to make contact with the ways that we can nourish our energy, the things that can kind of but increase our life force energy to then filter into the things that we're doing. And it is those day-to-day choices. And it is also having an awareness of our energy in any given moment and knowing what it is that we need.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from a really practical perspective, if you are totally new to this lexicon of words, if you're like, what do you mean by energy management? like the first place to start would be, where do you feel shit? Like, what's feeling shitty right now? Like, it's usually really obvious in life. It's a personal interaction that you're having with someone. It's someone doing something to you that's, like, in quotation marks, like someone doing something and that affecting you emotionally, and there being a whole story around that. Or there's a place where we're constantly feeling exhausted, we're constantly feeling resentful, or we're feeling guilty. Any of those shitty feelings is the place to start. Why are they there? That is your biology speaking to you. And I think the mistake so many of us make when it comes to this personal, and we sort of bypass personal energy management and energy hygiene practices, because we truly believe, or we feel in the moment, that the feeling of shittiness, whether it's guilt, burnout, stress, being emotionally triggered, whatever it is, we believe that that's a result of our external environment. When in reality, there is an equal interplay between the environment and what is occurring, and the way that we're receiving that, and what we're making that environment mean, and how we're allowing that environment to infiltrate us and to redirect us. And what I realized is that, healing and manifestation, that's all great, but the true power comes in being able to redirect my own personal energy system and unsubscribing from things that are otherwise sending me into what I would describe as like energetic debt and draining my life force. And this is a concept I think I first came into contact with through Carolyn Mace's work. So she's, like I said, the GOAT in terms of understanding where I think one time I heard her refer to it as like hemorrhaging energy. And what I really took from that is, it is something we do to ourselves. We do it to ourselves. And I think 99% of the time, it's something we're doing to ourselves. So when we begin to shift the way we relate to our personal energy system, and this is where human design for me is so pivotal, because it's literally a sort of an anatomical sort of map of human energetics. And when I can run it through that system and increase my awareness of myself and actually question the belief systems that I hold, as in my partner Harry, like he could do something, he could be like, I'm gonna go fishing again, and I'm like, that motherfucker never wants to spend time with me, whatever the story is. 5 days ago I went fishing and he promised, like, whatever fucking bullshit that my anxious avoidant attachment mind will throw up. And realizing that I am the creator of that. And that is me just filtering energy through my own personal energy system right into the wounds. And how could I redirect that and zoom out a little bit and realize that, oh my God, I want to be in a relationship with an independent human being who is also a sacral being who wants to do things that he loves. And this is literally meaning nothing about our relationship. And you better check yourself before you wreck yourself, Grizzly, or whatever human I'm having, right? So
yeah,
that is, to me, has
absolutely
been a really powerful thing.
This is big, because what I've realized, like for myself and my own experience, is this thing that you've spoken to, which is like taking responsibility. I think we like often don't want to do that, or we don't want to, we don't want to believe that actually we're playing like a big part in it as well. And that's been huge for me. That's been massive for me. And honestly, it's like quite liberating when you go, oh, actually I've played a big part in this, or I've made this mean something that it really didn't. And then you can kind of refine things and shift things, and it's very empowering. I think anyway, that's been my experience.
Yeah, it's extremely empowering, and I think it's what makes or breaks a happy, healthy life. Truly, you could have everything. You could be incarnated, an heiress, everything handed to you, loving family. You could be incarnated with all of the things, And you could suffer. You could suffer from the day that you're aware until the day that you die if you don't learn how to direct your personal energy system. The other thing, though, is that, doesn't matter how like consciously you were raised, in my experience, no one is immune to this because it's just simply not prevalent in our socialization process. We're not taught it at school. We're not taught it at home to the degree that we need to be taught it in terms of this autonomy, this higher awareness of why people do what they do. And so all of us were raised to take things personally. Our whole system is sort of set up to continue on with that narrative. And, we go and we decompress with our friends and we tell our friends how we feel. And that's something which is so important because we need to process our emotions. We need to share how it is. And there's something I really believe about humans is that we need to be witnessed. We need to be witnessed sometimes to actually be able to move energy. I think that's something we've always known about ourselves. And there's so many traditions that reflect that. But if we then go and share with someone and that person has been socialized to validate what it is that we're experiencing, there's a subtle piece that gets missed. And that subtlety is, are they validating you in your experience, or are they validating your interpretation of the events and the events themselves, and therefore feeding into your mythology and feeding into your story? And I see this all the time. I see my friends do it. I see people. I do it. We all do it. I will catch myself doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that we have to sort of disentangle. And human design and other awareness systems and all of these cool things that we can now access at our fingertips on the internet through podcasts, is something that we have to sort of go, okay, I have to do a little bit of unlearning and relearning here. And when I do, it opens up a whole new power of possibility. As well as just like you said, it's personally liberating because you go, oh my God, my life is not that bad. I just created this story or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And speaking to what you said with the, if you're speaking to a friend who validates, I think sometimes we don't realize, but we will consciously seek out the person who will give us what we feel we need in the moment as well. I see that a lot. I've seen myself do that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's a big one. It's a big one. Massive.
Something I'm always...
You've spoken... Oh, sorry.
A little bit of a lag.
No, you go.
I was just going to say on that, because it felt sort of very much so interrelated, is something I'm always questioning in myself is how can I be more lovingly honest? And being honest with myself is where I began, and living in like radical honesty. And like, trust me, the ego doesn't like that at first. Like the ego hates it. But as I gave myself evidence of that liberation piece that you just spoke to, it's given me more confidence and more empowerment to continue to be honest with myself. And then that's filtered out into my relationships. I think I've always been I'm an emotionally defined person in human design. I think the gated provocation 3 times. I'm a pretty direct person, but I'm always conscientious of my own conditioning. And I think, how can I be more lovingly honest when my friends come to me and they share something like that? And how can I hold space? And of course, I'm also like a mentor and a coach. And that's something that, in my business is of utmost importance to me in terms of the service I'm delivering. But even more than that, that's the type of person I want to be. I want to be someone who's not perpetuating someone else's illusion, because it can be really detrimental and damaging. And I think a lot of us are going around and doing that. And I've definitely done it in the past. And it's always destructive in the end. It truly is. And
in the end.
Yeah. Something I want to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. So we've spoken a lot about deconditioning and kind of untangling a little bit from those imprints. I wondered if you could kind of speak to the reconditioning piece. Like, what does that look like? What did that look like for you? Yeah, I'd love you to speak to that.
Yeah, so I love this. When I mean, human design has evolved even in the last few years, which is so cool. As more people sort of learn about the system and we explore it more in depth. But when I first came into human design, what I kept seeing was a lot of rhetoric around deconditioning and, you know, don't be who they told you to be who you really are, sort of messaging. And the way I would see that translated into practice was where people sort of dropping a lot of things and canceling a lot of things out of their life and saying, I quit my job, yay, like, or whatever it is, or I'm not hanging out with that person who drains me anymore. And, you know, they're out of my lives. And
yeah,
something about that to me is always like, that's not, no, I don't, I'm all for saying no, but it's not aligned. And I'm all for, you know, having healthy boundaries if someone's not a healthy relationship for you. And I'm all for leaving that job, but that can't be the answer. Like that's not going to get you very far. That will create space in your life. But eventually just saying no to the things that are quote unquote out of alignment is not going to create an aligned life when your habitual body has not been living an aligned life up until this moment. So reconditioning is about actually this experimenting piece where we have to try on these new identities and we have to entice our nervous systems into believing that it is safe for us to be our authentic selves. And sometimes our authentic selves are going to ask us to grow into a version of ourselves that we haven't actually met yet. And so for me, you know, when I left law and I was like, okay, I'm going to start this business. This is happening, which it wasn't really planned like that. Again, it was like the universe pushed it into my face and I was like, well, shit, this is what's happening. But when I first left law, I did expect that was going to solve all of my problems, sort of thing. That I felt like leaving this law career, this was all of my problems. This is, you know, walking away will. No, I had a burnt out body. My, you know, nervous system was fucking fried. I had been living this identity that wasn't truly me. And so I had to recondition my body back into safety in being really authentic as who I am, as well as learn new ways to work. You know, as a sacral being, I experienced my signature satisfaction through work. And I hated work at that point. I was like, I want to lay on a beach for 6 months straight and do fucking nothing. Like that was, and I sort of did that during the pandemic a little bit, a lot. And it was amazing. But eventually my authentic, my deepest like signature self was pining for a more creative existence. And even though I knew that creativity was intrinsic within me, my body didn't know how to live as that person day to day. I had to recondition myself back into, and this is where, you know, I think the word that we want to use is self-discipline, but it's more than that. It's about bringing the body back into a new habitual way of being. And it's not about doing it because it's a rule. It's about creating a new habit. And that for me has been really pivotal in my journey. But every single client that I've ever worked with, deconditioning is not enough. We have to recondition you as well. And that's the experiment.
Yeah. And that takes time. And that also does not just like snap your fingers and feel good straight away. Like there can be a lot of resistance. Like you were talking about lying on the beach for 6 hours a day. Obviously I have 3 children, so that just doesn't feel like my reality. It sounds delightful. But I think if I had, for me, like had gone, you know, oh, I'll just go lie, that'll solve all my problems, I'll go lie on the beach all day, I would have 1,001 things playing in my head about why that was not a good option or why that doesn't feel good or why I shouldn't do that or So it's a process. And I love what you said about experimenting with it, because, yeah, it's not going to feel fantastic straight away.
Yeah.
And a lot of it will feel, I think, from my experience anyway, quite uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but necessary.
Yeah. It's one of the
Yeah.
fallacies of this alignment culture that we have, where it's like, you know, do what lights you up, and it's like, that's it. And it's like, that's easy. And if it doesn't light you up, it's not correct, and you can trust the universe. It's like, fuck no. Like, we have to see what humans do. Like,
We're having a human experience here, guys.
yeah, and of course as well, like, you know, what is your contextualized understanding of discomfort at this point? Because there's so many examples of healthy friction in nature. There's so many examples of things and creativity being something that arrives on the other side of some kind of cataclysm or initiation or transition or growth phase. And so I think that this rhetoric around alignment culture and it always feeling good, and I want to have a flowy business, and, you know, I have a very flowy business, and I'm constantly challenging myself and moving through deep discomfort. And I can genuinely say I'd much prefer that over the discomfort of staying the same and living the way I was. We can't use alignment culture or human design or anything like that to bypass growth. If we do, well, again, have fun staying right where you are.
It'll be a loop. Yeah, it's just, you'll just keep going around and around. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, we know this. Well, maybe we don't all know this, but at least, you know, I feel like I know that, like, growth does not come from when you are, you know, just cruising along. That is, and everything's fine and dandy. Like, the real growth happens, and the real learnings all happen through some kind of discomfort, or, as you said, initiation, and just being able to kind of meet that and go, okay, this is here. There's something in this for me, you know, which isn't always easy to do. And like you were saying before, the ego has a way of telling us no. But I'm just glad you brought up this whole, you know, the concept of the alignment culture, because, yeah, ultimately we are having a human experience which is filled with both light and dark, good times and bad, brutal and beautiful. And, you know, that is what it is. You know, we are going to experience both.
100%. And energy alignment and taking care of our personal energy system, the whole point of doing that should be to increase our vitality and therefore our resiliency, so that we can be totally equipped and resourced when we move into those phases of inevitable discomfort, and we can meet them with our full potential, and we can, you know, we'll sink or swim, and if we sink, we learn something, you know, and if we swim, amazing, we're moving on. But there's something there for us either way. When we're really resilient and when our energy bank account is full and we live regeneratively, meaning we have the capacity to get knocked down and get back up, and we're totally okay because we are fully formed humans with this whole system in place, then that's what is ultimately going to allow us to grow.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm living proof of this.
You are.
I want to know I want to know what your what's the word I'm looking for? How would you describe vitality? What does that mean for you? What does that look like for you when you are feeling your most vital? And what is it that you kind of implement in your life to fuel that?
I love this question. I would define vitality, or living in vitality, as living in truth. Truth is the key word there. I think a lot of the time we associate vitality with feeling, you know, super energetically overflowing, which of course that should be our, you know, we want that to be our baseline. But I think the reality of life is that there's many seasons that are going to challenge us, and there are many things that are totally outside of our control as well, which is why, again, we need our personal energy system actually spending energy on things that are real, because there's some real challenging things out in life, and our stories, our imagination is not helpful when it comes to navigating that. So if we're living in truth, it means that we have a capacity to move with the season that we're in, and we're letting ourselves be in that season, and we're taking care of our needs as they arise in that season. And so if we move through a season of change, then in that season of change, then vitality just looks like the truth of that moment. And some moments that might mean surrender, and having a moment with myself to say, okay, Grizzly, you need to surrender to this. Like, you are draining energy out of your bank account, resisting, chucking a little hissy fit, bratty like moment, trying to resist this change and accept, and getting angry and blaming it's someone else's fault. You know, blame is a big one. Like if you know you're blaming someone else, then it's definitely a big energy drain. So honoring the truth of the moment is what it is for me, because as well, being an emotionally defined person, I'm someone, so my solar plexus is defined in my chart. That means I'm an emotional being. Then what that means is that I innately experience life through this intense spectrum of hope to pain. And so when I'm doing that, I'm not going to feel on top of the world and bursting with energy when I'm at the bottom of my wave. It's just not my physical lived experience. It's not my reality. And so being with the truth of that and accepting that and identifying the truths that are there for me personally, as opposed to stories that I may be telling myself in that moment, is the key to vitality. And it allows me to digest life and see life with clarity that is always feeding into my decisions and the choices that I make.
I love that so much. I love that so much. Oh my gosh, I feel like I could talk about that for a day. Yeah, there's a lot to take. I think, you know, I see this like this reoccurring kind of theme in a couple of other conversations I've had as well, and it is that obviously there, you know, surrender, but it is just an acceptance of where you're at. And I think that's why I started our conversation with asking, like, what season of life are you in? Because we have to, I think it's very important for us to understand that and accept the season of life that we're in, and what's happening for us. And that then filters into all of the decisions we make. And yeah, so I really love that. I think that's absolutely key. Yeah. So this podcast is obviously titled A Nourished Woman, and I want to know what that looks like for you. What is nourishing for you? And you can go as kind of practical and grassroots level as you like, but yeah, what is particularly nourishing for you?
I want to say the number one thing is play. Play is nourishing. And anything that is associated with the energetics of play, which I would describe as including anything that allows me to not take myself too seriously, anything that allows me to explore new horizons, anything that allows me to be creative and present in the moment, anything that feels like play. That is, to me, I mean, I'm a Manny Gen. That's a very typical Manny Gen thing to say, I think, but things that feel playful, that is the shit to me. And that could be through connection, that could be through work, that could be through the things that I preoccupy myself with. And I can experience moments of play, I think, you know, and I've had to learn to experience them even when I am at sort of a lot more melancholy state. It's this, I can just be with this. Who knows where this is going to go? Let's just go on this ride. Let's just be a little bit more curious. When I can get into that energy for myself and do a little bit of like ego dissolution work there, because I'm a Leo. I have a Leo South Node. I'm also Leo MC. I just think that like there's this bratty ego part of my shadow self that will write my stories, and I try to do things to neutralize that part of myself, and not taking myself seriously is the key to that.
Yeah. I love that. I also love that because I think I may be generalizing, but I think it's quite hard for women to connect to a playful side of themselves. I certainly have experienced that, like, absolutely. Even having kids, like, finding it really difficult to kind of engage in play, even with them. But I suppose when you're younger, play looks a certain way. Obviously being with your friends a lot and things like that, you know. But yeah, I don't know, as we get older, and I think even potentially as we become mothers or, you know, have a relationship or a business or, you know, whatever it might be, it's just very hard for us to connect with that side of ourselves. So I really love that. And I love that that's really important to you. I just think it's the conditioning piece again, isn't it? It's sort of like, you know, we've got to be a grown up and like, you know,
Yeah.
like, and we end up taking things far too seriously.
And what I've really learned through my own business is that it's just so counterproductive. It's extremely limiting.
Mm,
It constrains our
mm,
creativity, it constrains our innovation, it constrains our self-leadership, and it keeps
mm-hmm,
us in those socialized behaviors because, you know, when I was this Miss Goody Two Shoes, I'm going to be a senior associate by the end of the year sort of thing, I was really fixated on that external metric of getting a promotion or whatever
mm,
it was, or hitting some income level. And again, that just kept
mm-hmm,
me outside of my true identity, or locked out of my true identity. So play for me is something that I try to associate more as an internal feeling in myself in terms of
mm,
how I'm using my
mm-hmm.
energy as opposed to the tasks that I'm doing. Because sometimes I'm in playful
Yeah.
energy and I am actually in a workflow, and I'm still focused, but
Mm,
I'm keeping that playful side that's like,
mm,
fuck. And this is what I say literally every day to people. If anyone has ever like been in my space, I talk about this a lot, but literally like the way I like to talk to myself is the aliens are going to land soon. It's like life is fucking short. God knows how much time you have. Like, you're a pretty Gumby person, Greer. Like,
mm-hmm,
who knows what kind of accident you're going to have,
mm-hmm.
you know, at any moment. So what would it feel like to just take life a little less seriously? It's something that is the ultimate medicine.
Mm,
I haven't been able to find anything more nourishing than that.
mm, mm. It's like just joyful. It's like
It
pure
is.
joy.
It is. It,
Yeah, which is so important. It's so important. Um, I feel like we've definitely covered a lot. Um, but I did want to speak about, I think I wanted, you mentioned earlier that you made a big move, and so I'm not sure whether you actually knew anyone previous to moving or whether you've built, you know, your kind of your community up there around you since moving. But I'd love to know, because I think, well, obviously we know that kind of connection and community is so important for us. And I'd love to know what your experience has been like making the move and kind of building your community up there and what that looks like for you. Because I know that's a big value of yours is, you know, being able to spend time with all the people that you love.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this. So again, it was one of those things that when you appreciate it when you don't have it, right? So I
Mm,
I currently live in Airlie Beach, which is the hometown. Well, I actually grew up in the snowy mountains until I was 10 years old. So I lived in the snow, and then when my parents divorced, we moved up here to Airlie Beach when I was about, I think I was 10 or 11. And so I went to high school here and grew up in this small community.
mm,
And I had very, very, very close friends here, and always came home to Airlie, you know, on uni breaks, on at Christmas time. The community's here. My parents are still here. I was always connected to it. And when I eventually went to uni
Okay.
and all of those things, half of us all moved together down to Brisbane to go to uni together. So we do have something special that I think is, that's specific to the location that I grew up in and the people who are here. I do see that as like a very, it's like winning the lottery sort of thing. But when I, got further into my career, I ended up taking a job at a national law firm in Newcastle, and I was working between Newcastle and Sydney. And when I moved to Newcastle, I knew absolutely no one except my partner at the time. And for 3 years, I was trying desperately to find my community. And I had some beautiful friends there, but the community was never there. And I think I had this benchmark of what I'd grown up with. And so I was like, okay, this is not okay. Like, I feel like Tilikum, the Orcam whale that has been placed in the tank. Like, I am not okay. I have lived with humanity. I can't not. And it was fucked for me. It was a fucked experience. I hated it. And it made me not enjoy my time in Newcastle. So as well, that, really exacerbated my burnout because I was doing nothing but working a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
eventually, when I had this sort of shattering moment and I left the job and I left the relationship and I moved back to Brisbane, and all of those things fell away at the end of my Saturn return, it was seared into my soul. It was seared into my soul. It was like, I need my community. I'm never fucking doing that again. I don't care how much money or what job it is, or it was just so reflected in my reality that this was a non-negotiable value of mine. And so I'm really grateful for that lesson and having that. And then I moved home and, of course, the people who are here now and the people who are in my community, I haven't known all of them my whole life, but a lot of them I have known since I was 14. And they're friends who really are
Amazing.
family. And so when I'm here now, we are so deeply connected because all of us sort of had the same experience of moving. We've all traveled away and then sort of come back and been like, oh my God, it's so good here. Like, you don't realize the community you have. And I think something I'm really grateful for is that everyone fosters it. Everyone treats it as sacred. No one takes it for granted. And we have people who are part of our, friendship group now that did not, grow here, like grow up here. And they always like back to us, this is such a special thing. And so we put love there. And, half our friends have kids. Most of us have fur babies, and it's an evolving community, but we know it's precious. We know it's precious and we treat it like that. It's also something that I believe so deeply because of the experience that I had, that it is absolutely critical as a human need. And if we don't have community in our lives, we can't be healthy and happy and functioning in the same way that we would otherwise. And I think about Blackfish, I think about that documentary, and I think about how that whale went crazy when you put it in captivity and you put it in isolation. And I just think none of us are designed for that. And on the other side of the pandemic, I've encountered a lot of this in friends and family who live away, and in my clients. And it's something that I think we have to battle it. We actually have to consciously go, this is not all right. And it's not okay that our society normalizes this. And I'm going to sit here and go, fuck no. Like, if you are not happy where you're living, please think about the options you have to create a better life for yourself and to find a different community, because that's the bedrock of your ability to be happy in this life and nourished. And I think it's
Absolutely.
it's like a human right that we, are very privileged, speaking from this privileged position of being someone who grew up in Australia, and in the small town that I did. It's a privileged position to be in, but it is also critical for every single human being to be supported and connected by some form of community, whether it's your neighbors, whether it's community, at least online. But in some way, shape, or form, we need each other. We all really need each other. No one's exempt from
definitely. No. But I think it's also important, like, I find that community, it seems so much easier to foster in small towns. You were speaking about like how sacred you all feel about your community. And I feel like that is something that's kind of, it's definitely more of a small town thing. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist elsewhere. I acknowledge it does. But yeah, I was actually thinking about that today because we were speaking about where I grew up. And yeah, so it definitely seems like it is something that is, I don't know, maybe held with a little bit more importance in a small town, I should say, than in a big city. I also think that, as we kind of move through our life and, for example, make contact with some of, this and learn more about ourselves and make contact with these self-awareness tools, we can find that some relationships, and as we are living more authentically, we can find that some relationships do start to kind of drop off or, but that can also be, I think, quite hard for some people to navigate. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about that as well. And just that the key here is, I think, is to show up in your relationships authentically so that you do know like who are your real people. And it is a quality over quantity thing, I think.
100%. Yeah. If you're being yourself and you're loving yourself as yourself, you're teaching other people how to do the same. And that's going to be mirrored in your relationships. I deeply believe that. And something I see more often in at least my experience working with clients and just people in my life is that it can be really easy to develop a spiritual ego that actually has the opposite effect in bringing in connection. And I see this a lot where, people are developing their self-awareness, they're going through a transformation, and all of a sudden they're noticing what other people are doing really crystal clear. And it's just this like laser focus on they're not living in alignment. They're not living their truth. I can't be around them. They don't see me. They don't respect what I'm doing. They don't honor my boundaries, which is one of my I hate when people say that. I'm like, I'm sorry. If you need other people to honor your boundaries, you don't have boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, it's your choice.
No.
But so I see it a lot, and I think I would much prefer or encourage people to look at that and say, okay, I'm starting to feel a disparity. What am I making this mean? What story am I constructing out of this? Because I really believe the higher self path is to stay in your lane and clear up your side of the street and notice how people start to change their interactions with you as you show up to life in a different way. And if your self-development is contingent upon someone else recognizing your self-development or someone else meeting you in the same way as your own self-development, when I'm sorry, I'm going to like burst your little bubble and say, this is not self-development. This is you creating another ego identity around your spirituality. And I see people walk away from relationships, which I think you didn't need to do that, or that wasn't based on truth. I myself get in my spiritual ego about things a lot. I'm like, I have this higher awareness. I understand this. And the ego is such a little shady bitch sometimes. Like, she can really launch a campaign. And so we just have to be aware of that aspect of our humanity. And something I find really fucking healthy for me and really, really nourishing is the fact that a lot of my friends and family in my personal life, they have very little idea of what I do in my business. I'm just grizzly to them. Of course there's like dynamics in the way I relate with people that like I'm me, who I am. but I don't need anyone else to be subscribing. I don't give a fuck if half my friends don't even believe in human design. I'm like, cool, I totally respect your autonomy.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything about what I believe. It doesn't affect how I feel about myself.
Yeah.
So I would like to encourage
Yeah.
more of that in the spiritual community. I think sometimes we can like segregate ourselves and we're only talking to other people who speak this language sometimes. And it's like, let's humble ourselves a little bit over here, because the real test of spiritual development is how well you handle people who are not speaking that language. And
Yeah.
if the spirituality,
Absolutely.
if your higher self is contingent upon you being handled in a particular way, then you have more work to do. Myself included in all of that. So
Definitely.
yeah, I see it a lot.
Definitely. And I think also it goes the other way too, where it's like we can have different experiences with different people. We can take things, I don't mean actually take things, but you know what I mean? Like there are certain people we love to spend time with because, yeah, we can be in our playful energy with them. And then there are other people that we might connect with who we can really go deep with and like, you know, like talk about all of the things, you know? So I think it's that too. It's like recognizing we're not going to get everything from everyone. Obviously, this is big, I think, with intimate relationships, because we kind of have this expectation that we're going to have everything we need from this one poor person. And, you know, that's not the reality. There are many, many things that we can get from all of the different, you know, and I find this as well really important in obviously like my day-to-day life, my friends, my family, the people I'm connecting with in person, my in-person community, but also the people that or the community I've built around me within my business too, and just how helpful that has been. And I know that you and I have spoken about obviously support and like how important it is, and to build these co-creative relationships within our, you know, business and work life as well.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because you're right. There is this, on the flip side of that, we 100% need to foster that co-creative space and to feel support. So I think the key thing there is we get to curate that and we get to consciously engage in that. And particularly when it comes to our businesses and our art and the work that we're sharing with the world, I think that gets to be its own little sanctuary. And one of the things I love most about being a creative entrepreneur is that when I am in this space, I mean, I'm having a conversation like this with you. Like, this is amazing. I get all of my, you know, these sorts of needs met in this space. And then outside of that, having the receptivity to be able to receive other things from other people. I love that you said that. Absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So true. In terms of the unique experience of being a creative entrepreneur as well, you know, it can be so lonely. You're kind of wearing both of these sort of isolating archetypes, the artist and the business owner or the CEO. They can both feel like very lonely journeys. And there's certain experiences that you have in that space which other people are not going to even have any idea as to what you're talking about. And if we are going to go on this journey, having really great support and people we can talk to and get out of our own heads and, you know, receive some encouragement and collaborate with and all of those things, I just think it's so important. And I had to open myself up to that in the beginning. I was really resistant to receiving help when it came to my art, particularly. Aquarius moon, single definition. I was like, no one even come near this. Like, I do not even want to talk to you about. Like, it was very vulnerable. What that was obviously enmeshed with, which is why I now speak to this, what I call the separation of powers, which is having this sort of energetic sovereignty between your relationship with yourself as a leader, your relationship with your art as an artist, your relationship with your business as a CEO, and keeping those powers separate so that you can actually fulfill their potential without getting things enmeshed and entangled. But at the end of the day, we're all human and we all have moments where we have self-doubt, and we all have moments where we just sit there like, spiraling, or we have moments where we go down and follow a red herring and it's totally not what we thought, and we confuse ourselves and get turned around, and we need someone else to be coming in here delivering some truth bombs and recontextualizing the experience for us. Like I believe deeply that we all, and nowhere more so than in this space of creative entrepreneurship for that reason. So yeah, I love that you mentioned that co-creative element.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like, well, I don't feel like I know. One of the ways that I love to create art is in, cooking and preparing delicious meals. At least I think they are. My kids don't always. Honestly, if they were the judges of my art, that would be they're my harshest critics.
They grow out.
What is your relation? Because no, I hope they. Well, I hope they do. I wanted to ask because I'm always going to come back to the food, and so I want to know, like, what is your relationship with food, and is that something like, do you love to cook? Are you do you prioritize eating organic or anything like that? Like, what is your relationship to all of that?
I think like every other millennial in my 20s, I was just a fucking bitch to my body. I was a nasty bitch. I was so mean to myself. I just constantly, I would like always just like obsessive over, I need to lose a few kilos. I need to exercise was always associated with this energy of obligation, never joy. I never associated exercise with joy. I only associated it with obligation. And then coupled with that, food was something that was just a source of constant control, worry. And it's really interesting for me as I've moved into my human design experiment, and I've entered into this commitment to live in truth and to actively nourish my personal energy system. And going back to what we were saying in the beginning about identifying the inner dialogue that we have and taking responsibility for how we're contributing to that dialogue and how that dialogue is directly informing our choices. So when I went into that space and I started to get honest with myself, I realized that I was absolutely not nourishing myself, no matter what organic food I ate or how many power yoga classes I did. It wasn't nourishment. And something eventually switched inside me where, as I shifted this relationship with myself, and I, for want of a better expression, learned to love myself. I learned to truly love my experience of being an imperfect human and starting to treat it as really precious, and bringing this energy of gratitude into my body. As I shifted all of these little pieces over time, my relationship with food has totally changed. I mean, I used to get to the end of every day and be like, what did I eat today? What am I going to eat tomorrow? How am I going to be better? Like, how am I going to be better? It's so toxic. And, you might have met me and not thought that from the outside. So I'm being brutally honest here. Like, that's really what was going on internally. And I think for so many of us, it is. Versus now, it's such an intuitive feeling, and food is 100% connected with joy, but it's not really, it's not something I do to feel good.
Amen.
Yeah. And I don't eat to feel good now. I just have a relationship where I appreciate the nourishment and I'm conscious about the nourishment, and that feels really good. And having this freedom to be really present in my body and to not be working on someone else's time schedule and stuck in a air-conditioned office under fluorescent lighting, and to be able to move when I want to move or whatever, the privileges that come along with that, helped me as well to get more present into my body and to begin making choices. So now, and since entering into my human design experiment, I, honest to God, can say, hand on my heart, I eat more than I ever did when I was in my 20s. But I shed, I went down like a whole size over the last few years. I would say like consistently, maybe like, I don't know how many kilos, but I went down a whole dress size.
Yeah.
And I eat more. And it's because I'm eating things and at times, and the things that I'm eating it's all intuitive and it's all moving with the needs of my body. And my body is different every single day. And it's different week to week, obviously, as a woman as well.
Yeah.
And so it's more just living in a symbiotic relationship with nourishment, and for it being something that is receptive and dynamic, as opposed to a reduction of some kind of rule system and a belief system around what I can and cannot. But outside of that, I try to only eat organic, or when we go grocery shopping, it's all organic. And then on the weekends, give me a bloody steak and fries at the pub, like my absolute favorite. And I never anymore. And I love gelato and I love cheese. I love cheese.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. You're speaking my language.
Story every time you take a photo of your food, I'm like, dear Lord, help me. And that's why I said your children, they're going to be like, our mum's the best cook. And you'll be like that. You'll get the praise that you for all these years. I know you will. But yeah, it's probably, it's okay. It's one of those achievements where people love to say to me, oh my God, you were a litigation lawyer. Like, that's amazing. Or you've started your own business. That's amazing. What an achievement. On a personal level, getting to this place with my body and with food and with how I feel about myself is my greatest achievement I've ever. Apart from maintaining and developing healthy relationships and cutting out a lot of my own bullshit that I inherited through, broken family systems and all of that. Like, I'm very proud of that as well. But I think this is something that, outside of how we look, just the feeling, I wish there was some way I could visually express the feeling on the inside, because that's real nourishment.
Oh my God, that resonates so deeply with me. I can't even explain.
Yeah.
I feel exactly the same way. And I think obviously we're so overwhelmed with all the different options of things we can and should, and as we learn more, and and obviously we want to be conscious of some things, but intuitive eating, that is where it's at. And the ability to tune into your body and to know your satiation cues, to know when you're actually full, to be mindfully eating, like, it is everything. And it makes a huge difference, I think, to not only the way you are digesting your food, but also the way you are, therefore, digesting your life and moving through your life. And yeah, it's been massive for me. But I think, or I know that it is difficult for a lot of people. I don't even think it's specific to women, but a lot of people to understand those cues, or to, because they're like, in survival mode, or, they don't have that relationship with food. They don't have the relationship or the joy, for cooking and preparing food. They're too busy, all of these things, so that is key, obviously, being in a place where you can. And I think, human design definitely helps you get there. Yeah. Absolutely. I believe that.
I love what you said there about like knowing your satiation cues and how that does affect the way, you digest food, literally, but also life. I think that's really, that's really profound. And honestly, like, probably if you were trying to, if you did one thing in your life and you just did that, it would totally change your life. And I wish there was a way to convey that, but it is such an inside job, like you said. And
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
at a wider level, our society systemically keeps us in a place where we are disconnected from our bodies. And that begins early on and is reinforced. And we might say we've come a long way with body positivity or whatever that is about. But take a look on social media. Like, what are the images that are getting circulated? You know, how is this? What is bombarding our senses every day? And what are we having to face in terms of actively unsubscribing from those belief systems? I mean, I absolutely can't imagine what it would be like to be a 16-year-old growing up with access to Instagram and social media. I think I was in that very final year where I got Facebook my first year out of school in 2007. So, you know, I made it through high school and adolescence without social media. And, you know, how lucky were we to have that? And there's new challenges that we're now facing. And I just think it's an important part, because the thing that comes along with this whole intuitive eating piece is that we blame ourselves for not being that like that in the first place. And that was my experience when I was in my early 20s, when I said I was a nasty bitch to myself, and how I would speak to myself internally, because I really believed it was my failure so deeply. And no, that's not true. I had the ability to fix it for myself, but I didn't create that conditioning imprint. I didn't, you know, fuck up my gut health with processed foods, like knowing that they were bad for me when I was younger or whatever. So we do have to acknowledge the role that the system and society has in that, in terms of self-compassion, because otherwise we won't even get to the place of self-understanding to then explore with intuitive eating. We really have to neutralize that blame piece.
Absolutely. I think, and that goes across a lot of different facets of our life as well, not just food and exercise. Self-compassion is huge. Well, I've taken up so much of your time. I so appreciate it. I do have one fun final question, and that is, what if you could eat one thing? This is difficult, I know, but if you could pick one thing to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh my God. That's so hard for me, because my whole thing is that I don't like anything.
Same. Same. But I went with something very nostalgic. For me, it has to be, like, I have this intense lineage of like amazing cooks in my life. Well, some in my life and some now gone, unfortunately. And for me, it is the Sunday roast. It is the coming together. It's the family. For me, it's more than just the actual food, which is always delicious. Gravy from scratch. You cannot beat it.
Oh my God.
Give me any kind of meat as a roast. Like, I swear to you, I used to drink my mum and my nanny's gravy. Like, I could drink it. I could eat nothing else. But for me, it's a Sunday roast because, What was that?
Oh, I was like, I can't wait to taste your Sunday roast. Like, I need to be at one of these.
You do.
I would probably, I mean, if I was just thinking about the food part, I love that you've brought it back to the coming together, because that social piece around food is super important to me as well. I hate eating alone. I'm a raiser alone, but when it comes to sitting down for a big meal, I want all my people, I want conversation. I'm high sound, that's probably why, but so I think I'd probably say something similar in terms of like some kind of slow cooked meat. I love red meat. I love lamb. Slow cooked lamb shanks.
I was gonna say, it's got to be lamb. I'm sure you got some kind of your past life. You were like Greek in a past life or something like that.
Probably. Delicious. But otherwise, I love Japanese food. I love. Like, I love. Okay, this is what I really love. When there's lots of different things. Like, I want lots of different types of dishes.
Oh, like right, like a bento style.
Or like, you know, the izakaya, or, you know, and that's another good thing about roasts. I love that there's so many different dishes, because I love to have of everything, like a zesty salad with really juicy meat and then like creamy, like all of the different textures and flavors is just
It's the combination. Yeah, it's the combination of all those things. I'm trying to teach my children this at the moment because kids, they eat things separately, and I'm trying to explain to them that there's a reason that all of these things are together on your plate. It's because, and like, honestly, Jonty's the same. Like, I love my husband, but he's kind of the same. He like eats his meat first because you've got to eat that warm, and then he moves on to the other things. Anyway, I'm like, there's a reason all of these things are together here right now. There is a combination of flavors that you're missing out on.
You psychopaths. It's like, yeah. People who are about butter, I'm like, you are.
There's texture, there's like, yeah, there's complexity of flavor, there's like salty, sweet, umami. Like, come on, guys. Anyway, I'm trying to educate them.
Oh, I get it.
There is, yeah, honestly, yeah.
It's
I'm glad you
interesting.
understand.
Maybe we should check their design though, because there's certain people who are designed to eat, you know, one thing at a time, or, you know, eat in a quieter space. But I'm with you on the combination piece. I love that. And like juiciness and flavors and all of the things.
Yeah. Right. I'm trying to remember what mine is in my human design. I think mine is direct light. And so I'm pretty sure mine is direct light. So it's like, I like things to, and this is like, presentation is very important to me. Like the way that it looks on the plate. I like a multitude of colors. Yeah.
I need to pull your chart up now. We haven't looked at that in a little while.
Everybody go look at what, everybody go and check it out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, your wisdom is like nothing else. And, you know, you have been just the most significant person, honestly, outside of my intimate relationships and family over the last year. And I'm so thrilled that you could be here to have this conversation with me.
I am celebrating you, Mikka. This podcast is... It's going to be incredible. And I'm so grateful to have connected with you. You are a person who's really embodied in what it is that you are about. You're about it. That's what Beyonce says. She's like, don't talk about it, be about it. And you are about it. I fucking love it so much. So it's been my honor and my privilege.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you so much. I absolutely loved this conversation with Greer. This felt like a real full circle moment for me. And it is, and I do not say this lightly, it is a real honor for me to be able to have these conversations with women who are doing incredibly important things in the world, and to give them the opportunity to share that wisdom with those who haven't made contact with it yet. So thank you for listening. I hope you found this conversation as expansive as I did having it. And I encourage you to connect with Greer. All of her details I've linked in the show notes. Something I wanted to leave you with, which is one of my favorite things that Greer's ever said, is that Earth needs our creative legacy. Thank you for listening, and you'll hear from me next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Nourished Woman. I hope something in this conversation resonated with you, and if so, please share it with a friend. You can hit follow or write a review or simply share on social media. It would be amazing. Thank you so much again for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself.